Hello, BookTube. We're going to do our read-alongs on this channel a little late, unfortunately. I apologize for that. Yesterday, Sunday, is the usual day for our read-alongs on this channel, but it was very hot and very bright and very humid all day. So you had high midday heat first thing in the morning, and it just stayed that way all day long. And in high summer, those days tend to produce in me a kind of languor, kind of daze that is very pleasant. And so I spent the whole day reading, just bonelessly, formlessly reading, draped over every piece of furniture in the world. And by the time I seriously thought to make videos, it was like 9:30 at night, and I have slow upload speeds here, so I knew that there wouldn't be any videos anyway, so I just let it go. Sorry about that. But we'll do it all. We'll do our read-alongs today. It's only an extra day, and we're 2/3 of the way through both of our books, both of which are 1880 books. Oddly enough. So we'll do the one that's not only written, set around 1880, but written around 1880, and that is Anthony Trollope's The Duke's Children. This is the final book in his Palliser series, which we have read all along from the beginning. We have made our way through the Palliser novels, and we're reading today from the chapter called Ishel to the chapter called Lord Gerald in Further Trouble. And in those chapters, we continue the storyline that we've seen already. There are basically two storylines in this novel, with a third one flirting around the edges. I don't think it's as successful as some people that I know who love these books think it is. The main two plot lines involve young people in love, which, despite the fact that Trollope was a middle-aged family man when he wrote these books, he's really good at it. I think he's really good at it. The first match is Lady Mary Palliser, who is the daughter of the Duke of Omnium, who we've been following for 6 books now. And since he is the grandest and the richest nobleman in the country, I think that might be just dust. The one thing I'm noticing this summer is that whatever might trigger allergies, every once in a while I get an allergy attack, and I will just sit on the edge of the bed or on the edge of a chair, sneezing every 20 seconds until spray of blood is coming out of my nose. It will happen for an hour, where I can't breathe, I can't see. All I can do is sneeze without standing up or drawing a breath of any kind, and the eyes burn in your head and all that. That has not happened this summer, and the summer is well spent. So, anyway, when the family was together, when the Duchess was alive, Lady Glencora is dead when this book starts. She gave her encouragement to Lady Mary's affection for a man named Frank Tregear, who is not a member of the nobility. He is not the son of an earl. He has a very minor property out in the country, but he hasn't inherited it yet. He has no money. He has no prospects. He has no job. But he himself is not a wastrel, and he's not a parasite. He's manly, as Trollope loves to call him. He's a decent, honorable, upright guy who was a friend at school of Lord Silverbridge, who is the Duke of Omnium's heir. Young Silverbridge is the center of another of the two plot lines in the book, but the plot line that kicks things off is that Lady Mary loves Frank Tregear and he loves her. But when he goes to the Duke of Omnium to ask if he may visit the house as her suitor, the Duke peremptorily dismisses him. This is just impossible. It breaks his heart. He's already heartbroken anyway, because Lady Glencora meant more to him than he himself realized. But it breaks his heart even more to realize that she encouraged the match, and that the parallels between a beautiful young spendthrift wanting to marry and seeming, the ability to interpret it as him wanting to marry for money, were exact with Burgo Fitzgerald, the beautiful young spendthrift who Lady Glencora was first in love with before she took the prudent course of advice of her family and his and married Plantagenet Palliser. So all of this, not just the reminder of his wife, not just the reminder of her imprudences, but also the reminder of her distant past, all of this makes the subject so intensely painful to the Duke of Omnium that he refuses Frank Tregear out of hand. And when he learns that Mrs. Finn, another old friend of ours who we've been reading about in one form or another for 6 books, when he learns that she knew about this attachment between the two young people and didn't immediately come to tell him, he is peremptory with her as well. And she, we read it in an earlier read-along, she sends him a dressing down of a letter advising him of everything that happened, and that her behavior was above reproach, and telling him in kind of cold terms that she doesn't expect his friendship back. And that's those kinds of letters, those kinds of interactions and thoughts on these characters are a little tough to take. We've lived with these people for so long. And Mrs. Finn, before she became Mrs. Finn, was intimately connected with the Duke's family. Not only was she Lady Glencora's best friend, but she was also the best friend of the Duke's predecessor, his uncle, the previous Duke of Omnium, in some very touching scenes. It's difficult to read of a split between the two of them. She demands that he apologize, and eventually he does, but he sends her a note of apology that's so short and so businesslike that it's basically another insult. And that's where things stand at the beginning of the chapters that we're reading today. 3 months have passed, but still, Lady Mary is an obedient daughter. She will not communicate with Frank Tregear. She will not see him, even surreptitiously. They meet once, but it's totally by accident, and she makes everything clear to her father immediately. But she tells her father, "I won't see him. I won't do anything without your knowledge and without your approval. But I will never marry anyone else, and I will be heartbroken if you don't let me marry him. I will be miserable. I will obey you, but I will be miserable." And the Duke, of course, as we know from having dealt with him for so many books, he's extremely thin-skinned and extremely sensitive, hothouse plant. He's not in politics at the moment in this book, but we still get the full measure of his querulous inner nature. And that is one of the major plot lines, is that Lady Mary and Frank Tregear are not allowed even to see each other and must not contemplate a match. The other plot line involves Silverbridge. It involves Lord Silverbridge. And there's a major plot line with him and a minor one. And sometimes it seems like Trollope doesn't know which is which, or maybe I'm reading it wrong. There's a plot line involving Silverbridge and horse racing. He has fallen in with a seedy crowd of the horse racing world, the demi-monde, and is betting large sums of money, and doesn't really know what he's doing. He's in the hands of scoundrels. One in particular, Major Tifto. And the other Silverbridge plotline also involves marriage, because he had for a while now been expressing affection to Lady Mabel Grex, who is the daughter of an impoverished and very unlikable earl, who had previously been in love with Frank Tregear. Silverbridge, she's very beautiful and very smart, and Silverbridge is toying with the idea of asking her to be his wife. He even gives her the ducal ring that belonged to however many generations of Pallisers before him, and has it refitted for her, has it resized so that she can wear it. Not a small thing at all, not a small gesture. Certainly shows where his mind is. He also implies to his father that that match will happen, because the father is eager for him to marry and settle down. But a spanner is thrown into the works in the form of an even more beautiful American heiress, Isabel Boncassen, who comes to England for an extended stay with her father, and immediately captures the attention of Silverbridge. He is enamored of her, as are a lot of other young men, but he seems to make a better impression on her than most of the other young men do. The match seems to be going somewhere. It seems to be digging into real territory. And Mabel Grex is at first scornful and highly sarcastic and wounding to Silverbridge. She seems perpetually to underestimate how sensitive he is, and that he's very much like his father. And she plays it wrong from the beginning in terms of seeing this relationship develop between him and the young American girl. And then once she realizes, Trollope gets us inside her world with merciless clarity, just merciless. She realizes that she had better change her attitude. She had better change her approach. and work to win Silverbridge. The last thing that was on her mind when we first meet her. She realizes that if she doesn't, she will lose him and have no one. Frank Tregear's heart is promised elsewhere. Silverbridge's heart, if it's promised elsewhere, will leave her nothing. It will leave her the impoverished daughter of a brutal man, living in her favorite spot in the world is their country state, which is falling apart and which is in ugly terrain on a black lake. In other words, her future is painted as complete despair if she doesn't try for this prize that before she had not deigned to stoop to pick up. It's a pretty brutal portrait. It's, to me, the standout thing in this novel. And as in the chapters that we're reading today, the contrast, the obvious contrast between those plot lines, is drawn brighter and brighter because the reader can't help. And believe me, in 1880, the reader also couldn't have helped notice that the situations are exactly the same. The objections are exactly the same, except for money, which everyone involved, including the Duke of Omnium, says that he doesn't care about. Isabel Boncassen is the daughter of an ordinary American scholar. Now, true, the Duke likes that scholar, likes talking to him, and doesn't like Earl Grex. But that doesn't seem to matter. The gossip around Isabel Boncassen, of course, as with any American, is that she's the daughter of a convict. And that's how the British upper class think of America just in general. But Silverbridge gets to make his own choice, even though so much more is riding on it. It's Lady Mary. The only thing that's riding on her choice is money, her portion of the estate inheritance. Silverbridge, it's the line. It's the family line. He is the heir. He will be the Duke of Omnium. But still, he gets to choose, whereas Lady Mary does not get to choose. And that stays true even in the chapters that we're reading today when Frank Tregear gets into Parliament. There is still this absolutely adamant objection to him on the grounds that the grounds become less and less clear. And there is a wonderful conversation. At one point, Lady Mary has a piercing headache when they're abroad and is just, in general, abjectly miserable. And at one point, the Duke is driven in despair to reach out for advice to the last person on earth that you would think that he would, which is Mrs. Finn, despite the interaction of letters, the exchange of letters that they've had that have basically severed their relationship. He still reaches out to her. And they have an amazing conversation. I want to indulge you and read just a bit of it. She says to him, a man may be bad, vicious, a spendthrift, eaten up by bad habits. And then the Duke frowned, thinking that she also had her mind intent on his Glencora and on Burgo Fitzgerald, and being most unwilling to have the difference between Burgo and Frank Tregear pointed out to him. Nor have I said, she continued, that even were none of these faults apparent in the character of a suitor, the lady should in all cases be advised to accept the young man because he has made himself agreeable to her. There may be discrepancies. There are, said the Duke, still with a low voice, but with infinite energy. Insurmountable discrepancies. I only said, Mrs. Finn continues, that this was a case in which it might be difficult for you to see your duty plainly. Why should that be? The Duke asked her, and she says, you will not have her break her heart. And the Duke, we have a long interval where we see the Duke's thoughts on the subject, and they are a muddle of contradictions, and we see that when he speaks. He says, no, he said at last, I would not have her break her heart if I understood what such words mean. They are generally, I think, used fantastically. You would not wish to see her overwhelmed by sorrow. Mrs. Finn tries to clarify things for him. Wish it? What a question to ask of a father. I must be more plain in my language, Duke. Though such a marriage be distasteful to you, it might perhaps be preferable to seeing her sorrowing always. And the Duke gives an answer that is unworthy of him. Why should it? I have sorrow always. We are all told that man is born to sorrow as surely as sparks fly upward. And Mrs. Finn, what can you do with short-sighted selfishness like that answer? She says, then I can say nothing further. And he says, you think I am cruel. And she says, if I am to say what I really think, I shall offend you. No, not unless you mean offense. I shall never do that to you, Duke. When you talk as you do now, you hardly know yourself. You think you could see her suffering and not be moved by it. But were it to be continued long, you would give way. Though we know there is an infinite an infinity of grief in this life, we still struggle to save those we love from grieving. If she be steadfast enough to cling to her affection for this man, then at last you will have to yield. He looked at her, frowning, but did not say a word. So she continues, then it will perhaps be a comfort to you to know that the man himself is trustworthy and honest. There was a terrible rebuke in this, but still he had called it down upon himself. He would not resent it, even in his heart. Thank you, he said, rising from his chair. Perhaps you will see her again this afternoon, and by that Mrs. Finn knows that she's dismissed. And that happens at the beginning, near the beginning of the chapters that we're reading today, and near the end of the chapters, Mrs. Cassowary, not Mrs. Cassowary, but another old friend of the Duke, likewise tells him, just outright, that you must yield. Unless you want her to be miserable, you must yield. There's no other way. You are misunderstanding your daughter. You are underestimating her. And those two things are the crux of the chapters that we're reading today, is those two plot lines getting more and more heated. There is a controversy on the racing plot. The Lord Silverbridge's favorite horse is lamed intentionally, and he also loses an astronomical amount of money. An amount of money that were Trollope's amounts, were his dollar or his pound amounts, translated into American currency. I think readers of this book would see much more clearly. There ought to be a footnote or a bracketed insert to let people know how much money is at stake here. It's an astronomical amount, enough to make a nobleman forever, enough to set someone up for life. And even that astronomical amount, when Silverbridge makes it clear to his father, is nothing to the Duke of Omnium. That's how wealthy he is. But there's a wonderful scene between father and son where Silverbridge is expecting to be dressed down, perhaps attacked. In a different household, he might expect to be disinherited. And instead, the Duke just immediately says, well, I'll pay it, but I want you to have nothing more to do with this world of horse racing. And by this point, Silverbridge he's eager to agree to that term. And the father says, well, let nothing more be said about it. It's a touching moment. And it does affect a change of heart in Silverbridge. And I think him moving away from that world, the demimonde of racing, and all these unworthy people that are in it, I think that Trollope is trying to say something about Silverbridge's move away from that world being somehow connected to his move into the orbit of Isabel Boncassen. It seems like his intensity for her, his passion for her, grows as he leaves that world. And I'm not quite sure what that means. But those two revelations to the Duke from two different people whose ear, this is a man who is not free with informality. Most people are not free to speak their mind to him, and the two people who are, in the course of the book, they bracket the reading we're doing today, both tell him, you will have to yield. This will kill your daughter and you don't want to do that. It's tough. It's tough not to read those moments and not wish that Lady Glencora were in this book. It's tough not to think how much more interesting. I mean, I love this book, but it's tough not to think how much more interesting it would be if she were here, making a mess of things and making things come out right. I'm doing both. But anyway, that is basically where we leave things today. And next time we will read from the chapter Lord Gerald in Further Trouble, just to the end of the book. We will finish The Duke's Children. By this point in the book, those of you who are reading along, I don't think you will have any trouble figuring out everything that's going to happen in the course of the book. I don't think you will. There's only one of the plot lines that I've discussed today. That all of them are inevitable. I believe that by the halfway point in any Trollope novel, virtually any Trollope novel, everything is inevitable. I don't think he was troubling that hard, except in the vague attempts that he makes sometimes at thrillers. I don't think he was struggling that hard to surprise his reader. He says many times, including a digression in this book that is just precious, that it's not really his intention to surprise his readers. That's not really what he's trying to do. And there isn't one Victorian author in 50 who could get away with writing that outright and still have his books popular. But there is one of the plot lines that I discussed today. I don't want to give things too much away, but there is one of the plot lines I discussed today that will, I think, stand out. Its conclusion is also inevitable. But I'd be curious to know when we talk next week, which will happen on a Sunday, barring another heat wave. I'd be curious to know what you all make of it. But I'm curious to know also what you made of these chapters. Like, for instance, what about the extensive racing world chapters? Did you feel that they were a distraction? Did you want to get back to other things? And also, we might as well address the Wilson Shugart in the room. Are any of you missing politics? When you're reading this book and Frank Tregear gets into Parliament, you're almost reminded that Parliament exists. There's so much of this that has nothing to do with parliamentary politics, because the Duke is out of office and Silverbridge is new to Parliament, and Frank Tregear is even newer. Are you finding that you're missing any of that? I'm just curious to know. We're in the thick of the Duke's Children now, and next time we will finish it. So I'm going to wrap this up for now. Sorry for the day delay, but it was just too beautiful yesterday to move at all. All I did was read. I'm sure that you can identify with that. But I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.